Good. It's your boy Jay with the J Academy, and today I'll be teaching you about the heart and how it functions. So let's get started. Here's the basic anatomy of the heart. So it has four chambers and it has a right and a left side. So the top two chambers are called atria, and the singular of that is an atrium. And the bottom two are called ventricles. So the right side of the heart, its function is to pump blood to the lungs. And the left side of the heart, its function is to pump blood to the body. So I know what you're thinking. Why is the right side on the left and why is the left side on the right? Well, that's because when you're looking at someone head on, like you would a patient, this is how you would see it. And this is almost how it's always drawn when you see a picture of it. So let's go on onto how it functions. So right now, I'm going to show you how one drop of blood goes through the heart, being deoxygenated, gets pumped to the lungs, comes back to the heart once it's oxygenated, and gets shot out to the rest of the body. And so step one is that the deoxygenated blood goes to the right atrium, either through the superior vena cava or the inferior vena cava. Now the inferior collects deoxygenated blood from the bottom below the heart, such as from the lower chest or the legs, and the superior vena cava gets blood from above the heart, such as from the head. So the deoxygenated blood, it goes to the right atrium. When the atria contract, it goes through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. And then when the ventricles contract, the blood goes through the pulmonary valve, through the pulmonary artery, because arteries go away from the heart, and it goes to the lungs where it gets oxygenated. And then once it gets oxygenated, it has to go back to the heart because it still needs to go get sent to the rest of the body, right? So then it goes through the pulmonary vein, because veins go towards the heart, into the left atrium. Now when the atria contract, it sends the blood from the left atrium and into the left ventricle through the mitral valve. And then when the left ventricle contracts, the oxygenated blood gets sent from the aortic, through the aortic valve, through the aorta, which is an artery, to the rest of the body. Now let's talk about valves for a sec. And so we have the atrioventricular valves, which are the valves between the atriums and the ventricles. That's why it's called atrioventricular. So on the right side, we have the tricuspid valve. That's between the right atrium and the right ventricle. And why it's called tricuspid is because it has three leaflets. On the left side, we have the mitral valve, also known as the bicuspid, because it has two leaflets, and that's between the left atrium and the left ventricle. And then we have the semilunar valves, which are between the ventricles and either the pulmonary artery or the aorta. And so on the right side, we have the pulmonary valve, and that goes from the left ventricle to the pulmonary artery. And then on the left side, we have the aortic valve, which is between the left ventricle and the aorta. Now it's called semilunar because semi means half and lunar means moon, because somehow it looks like a half moon. I don't really see it, which kind of reminds me of the time when I was sagging my pants back in high school and I was half mooning people. But let's not really talk about fashion, and let's talk about how the heart itself gets blood, right? And so the heart cells itself need to get blood. Well, you may be thinking, well, why can't it just get the blood, say, from the left ventricle when it's oxygenated and it absorbs it? Well, that's because the walls of the heart are really thick and the blood just can't get through. Right, so this is the body solution on how to get blood to the heart itself. So here's the aorta. Remember, left ventricle, it pumps the oxygenated blood through the aorta to the rest of the body, and then part of the aorta actually goes into blood vessels that supply the heart itself with its own supply of blood. And so that way the muscles of the heart can have oxygen for it to work. And then these arteries right here that supply the heart are called the coronary arteries. Right, so that's how it does it. Now let's go on to the cardiac cycle. And so how a normal person that's non-diseased, how it happens is that first the two atriums, they contract together and then the ventricles, then they contract together as well. And there's two parts to the cardiac cycle, and that's diastole and systole. If I can turn the page, it's very sticky, like Donald Trump in North Korea. All right, cool, right here. And so it's split into two parts, diastole and systole. Diastole is when the chamber refills with blood, and systole is when the chamber constricts and pumps the blood out. Right, so let's look at it from the ventricular side. So ventricular diastole is when the ventricles refill with blood. So as you can see here, the two atria, they're going to contract together and send blood to the ventricles. So the ventricles are refilling, right? So that's ventricular diastole. Now ventricular systole is when they contract and send their blood out. So right now, they just got blood from the atria, and so they're refilled and full blood, and now they're going to contract and they're going to send their blood out, and that's systole. Now let's look at it from the atrial side, right? And so over here, the atrium, they're going to be receiving blood from either the body or the lungs, and then they're refilling, and that's atrial diastole. And then right here, the atrium are contracting and sending their blood to the ventricles, and that's atrial systole. So that's what the terms diastole and systole means.